Hello, my precious little dreamers. It's that special time again, isn't it? Let's get you all tucked in just right. Wiggle your toes under the blankets until they're perfectly cozy. Now let your head sink deep into your pillow. That's it. Take a slow, gentle breath in and out. Feel your body getting heavier, more relaxed with each breath. The busy day is done, and now we get to drift away together on the wings of imagination. Tonight, our dear friends Sinbad and Yasmina are waiting to take us on a journey beyond the clouds, up where the stars twinkle like diamonds scattered across velvet. So close your eyes, my sweethearts, and let your minds soar as I tell you the tale of a most extraordinary night sky adventure. In a peaceful village by the sea, where waves sang lullabies to the shore, and seagulls painted white brushstrokes against blue skies, young Sinbad awoke to the sound of something tapping against his window. The moon hung full and bright in the night sky, casting silver light across his room. Tap, tap, tap! There it was again. Sinbad slipped out of bed and padded to the window. Outside, hovering in the moonlight, was Yasmina, her feathers gleaming with an almost magical shimmer. "Sinbad!" she whispered urgently as he opened the window. "You must come quickly. Something extraordinary is happening in the sky tonight." "What is it?" Sinbad asked, immediately alert despite the late hour. Adventure, after all, kept no regular schedule. "The stars," Yasmina said, her voice tinged with wonder. "They're dancing!" Within minutes, Sinbad had dressed and climbed down from his window, a small pack of essentials slung over his shoulder. Yasmina led him through the sleeping village, past fishermen's cottages and the silent marketplace, until they reached the small harbor where Sinbad's beloved ship, the Moonbeam, bobbed gently in the water. "Look up," Yasmina instructed as they stood on the dock. Sinbad tilted his head back and gasped. The stars above were not in their usual places. Instead, they moved across the night sky in graceful arcs and spirals, leaving trails of stardust behind them, like celestial dancers performing for the moon. "I've never seen anything like it," he breathed. "It's beautiful." "It's more than beautiful," Yasmina said, landing on his shoulder. "It's a message. The oldest stories say that when the stars dance, they're trying to show travelers the way to somewhere magical." Sinbad watched as several stars seemed to form a path, pointing out across the ocean. "They want us to follow," he realized. Without hesitation, Sinbad untied the moonbeam and prepared to set sail. The small ship, enchanted by a kindly sea witch years ago, required no crew to navigate. It responded to Sinbad's touch on the wheel, as if it could read his thoughts. As they sailed away from the harbor, the dancing stars seemed to brighten, their movements becoming more elaborate, more urgent. Directly overhead, 3 particularly bright stars began to spin in a tight circle, showering sparkles of light that fell like gentle rain around the moonbeam. "They're happy we're following," Yasmina observed, catching a sparkle on her wing and watching as it melted like a snowflake. Through the night they sailed, with only the dancing stars to guide them. The sea was unusually calm, as if it too was holding its breath in anticipation of something wonderful. As dawn approached, Sinbad might have expected the stars to fade, but they remained visible, brighter than the sun that was beginning to peek over the horizon. "Look there!" Yasmina suddenly called, pointing with her wing in the distance, where moments before there had been only open ocean. An island had appeared. It seemed to shimmer and shift, as if it wasn't quite sure it wanted to be seen. Tall, slender mountains reached toward the sky, their peaks wrapped in clouds that glowed with soft, multicolored light. "The Isle of Asteria," Yasmina whispered in awe. "I thought it was just a legend." "What's the legend?" Sinbad asked, adjusting their course toward the mysterious island. "They say it's a place where the stars come to rest when they're tired of shining in the sky," Yasmina explained. "A place of ancient knowledge and magic that appears only once every 100 years when the stars align in a special pattern." As they drew closer to the island, Sinbad could see that the beaches were not made of sand, but of tiny crystals that caught the light and broke it into thousands of rainbow fragments. The forests that covered the lower slopes of the mountains seemed to glow from within, as if each tree had captured a piece of starlight in its trunk. They anchored the moonbeam in a small protected cove and rowed to shore in a little boat. The moment Sinbad's foot touched the crystal beach, a tingling sensation ran through his entire body, as if the island itself was greeting him. "It feels alive," he said softly. "All truly magical places are a little bit alive," Yasmina replied, flying in circles around him, too excited to stay still. They followed a path of glowing stones that led from the beach into the forest. The trees here were unlike any Sinbad had ever seen. Their bark was smooth and pale, almost translucent, and their leaves seemed to be made of thin slices of gemstones that clinked together gently in the breeze, creating music like distant wind chimes. As they walked, Sinbad noticed small lights flickering between the trees, not fireflies, but tiny stars that had descended to float among the branches. Each one emitted a soft humming sound, and together they created a melody that seemed to tug at Sinbad's heart, urging him deeper into the forest. "They're singing to us," Yasmina said, her voice hushed with wonder. The path led them to a clearing where the trees formed a perfect circle. In the center stood a monument made of what appeared to be solidified moonlight, a tall, slender spire that twisted upward like a frozen whirlpool reaching for the sky. As they approached the monument, the tiny stars gathering in the clearing began to spin faster, their light growing more intense until Sinbad had to shield his eyes. When he looked again, the stars had formed the shape of a person, or rather, the suggestion of a person, composed entirely of starlight. "Welcome, travelers," the star being said, its voice like the chiming of crystal bells. "Few find their way to Asteria in the age of forgetting." "Who are you?" Sinbad asked, his voice steady despite his amazement. "I am Celeste, "Guardian of this sanctuary," the figure replied. "Once, long ago, your ancestors knew the way here. They came to learn the wisdom of the stars and to record their observations in the great library." "There's a library here?" Yasmina asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Celeste gestured toward the base of the largest mountain. "The library of celestial knowledge lies within the ancient city of Astrapolis, hidden from those who would misuse its wisdom. But tonight, as the stars dance their ancient pattern, the way is open to those with pure intentions." "Why did the stars guide us here?" Sinbad asked. A ripple seemed to pass through Celeste's starlight form, the equivalent, perhaps, of a sigh. "The knowledge contained within the library is in danger of being lost forever. The dance of the stars is a call for help, a final attempt to find someone worthy of preserving what we have protected for thousands of years." "Lost? How?" Yasmina fluttered closer to the star being. "The city draws its power from the connection between earth and sky," Celeste explained. "But something is blocking that connection, causing the city to fade from this reality. If the connection is not restored by dawn tomorrow, Astrapolis will vanish forever, taking all its knowledge with it." Sinbad felt a familiar stirring of determination in his chest. "We'll help you," he promised. "Just tell us what to do." Celeste's form brightened with what might have been hope. "Follow the path of fallen stars to the city gates. Within, you must find the observatory tower and reactivate the stellar alignment array. But be cautious. The force that disrupts our connection may try to hinder your efforts." With that warning, Celeste's form dissolved back into individual stars that scattered in all directions, leaving Sinbad and Yasmina alone in the clearing. "The path of fallen stars," Yasmina mused, looking around. "How do we find that?" As if in answer, one of the tiny stars that had been part of Celeste descended to hover before them. It bobbed in the air, then began to move toward the far side of the clearing, pausing to make sure they were following. The star led them along a winding path that gradually climbed the mountain slope. As they ascended, more stars joined their guide until a procession of twinkling lights illuminated their way. The path itself began to change, the earth beneath their feet giving way to a walkway made of smooth black glass, embedded with points of light, a perfect reflection of the night sky above. "It's like walking among the stars themselves," Sinbad whispered, almost afraid to break the magical silence that surrounded them. After what seemed like hours, but might have been minutes, for time moved strangely on this enchanted island, they crested a ridge and gasped at the sight before them. Nestled in a valley between mountain peaks was a city that shimmered with the same otherworldly light as the stars that had guided them here. Towers of crystal and structures of impossibly delicate design rose throughout the city, connected by bridges that seemed to be made of solidified moonbeams. At the center stood a tower taller than all the rest, its top open to the sky, where the dancing stars seemed to concentrate their movements. "That must be the observatory tower," Yasmina said, pointing with her wing. As they approached the city gates, magnificent arches of silver and opal that stood open in welcome, Sinbad noticed something troubling. Parts of the city seemed to flicker, becoming transparent for brief moments before solidifying again. It was as if Astrapolis was struggling to remain in their world. The streets within were paved with the same star-flecked material as the path that had led them here. But many sections had gone dark, the embedded stars extinguished. The buildings they passed were architectural marvels that defied earthly understanding. Some seemed to be built of frozen music, others of captured wind given solid form. But the city was silent. No inhabitants walked its streets. Only the stars that had guided them remained, urging them toward the central tower. As they neared the observatory, the flickering of the city grew more pronounced. Entire buildings would vanish for seconds at a time before reappearing. The very ground beneath their feet occasionally became insubstantial, forcing them to proceed with caution. The entrance to the observatory tower was a circular doorway that spiraled open at their approach. Inside, a staircase wrapped around the inner wall, ascending in a perfect spiral toward the open chamber at the top. "I feel like we're being watched," Yasmina whispered as they began to climb. Sinbad nodded. He had sensed it too. A presence neither friendly nor hostile, but cautious and ancient, observing their progress with great interest. The staircase seemed endless. Yet they did not tire as they climbed. Each step illuminated as their feet touched it, then dimmed again as they moved on, as if the tower itself was conserving its failing energy. Finally, they reached the top chamber, a circular room with a domed ceiling that was open to the night sky. The walls were lined with strange instruments of gold and crystal, and in the center of the room stood a complex apparatus that could only be the stellar alignment array that Celeste had mentioned. It resembled an elaborate armillary sphere, with concentric rings and delicate arms that could be adjusted to track the movements of celestial bodies. But many of the components were misaligned or missing entirely, and the soft glow that emanated from parts of the device was flickering weakly, like a candle about to be extinguished. "We need to fix it," Sinbad said, approaching the array cautiously. "But how?" Before Yasmina could respond, a shadow detached itself from the wall and moved toward them. It had no definite shape, shifting and flowing like ink in water. But there was intelligence in its movement, purpose and intention. "Who are you?" Sinbad asked, standing his ground despite the prickle of unease that ran down his spine. The shadow paused, then formed a shape that vaguely resembled a human figure, though its edges remained blurred and uncertain. When it spoke, its voice was like wind passing through empty halls. "I am the keeper," it said. the last of those who once tended this city. Are you the one disrupting the connection between earth and sky? Yasmina demanded, bristling with protective instinct. The shadow seemed to shrink in on itself. Not by choice, it replied, but by necessity. The knowledge contained in the great library is too dangerous for the world that exists now. I have seen what becomes of wisdom in the hands of those not ready to wield it. So you'd rather let it all be lost forever? Sinbad asked, trying to understand. Better lost than misused, the keeper said simply. Sinbad took a step toward the shadow, his expression earnest. I understand your concern, he said gently. But not all knowledge is dangerous, and not all people seek knowledge for harmful purposes. Wisdom that helps us understand the stars, the world, ourselves. That kind of knowledge makes us better, not worse. The keeper wavered, its shadowy form rippling with what might have been uncertainty. How can I trust that you won't use what you find here for ill purpose? You can't know for certain, Sinbad admitted. Just as I can't know if the choices I make are always right. But I do know that acting out of fear rarely leads to good outcomes. If you let all this beauty and wisdom vanish because you're afraid of what might happen, isn't that a kind of harm too? The shadow was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, it extended a tendril toward the stellar alignment array. If I help you repair this, you must promise to protect the library's contents, to share what can help, but guard what could harm. I promise, Sinbad said solemnly. With that, the keeper flowed into the array itself, its shadowy substance filling the gaps where components were missing. Now, it instructed, adjust the rings to match the dance of the stars above. Sinbad and Yasmina worked together, with Yasmina flying up to observe the patterns of the dancing stars and calling out instructions while Sinbad carefully adjusted the delicate mechanism. It was slow, precise work that required all their concentration. As each ring and arm was properly aligned, it began to glow with increasing brightness. The stars above seemed to respond, their dance becoming more focused, more purposeful, as if they were actively participating in the restoration. When the final adjustment was made, a beam of concentrated starlight shot down through the open dome, striking the center of the array. The entire mechanism began to spin, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, each component moving in perfect harmony with the others. The beam of light spread outward from the array, flowing down through the tower and into the foundations of the city. Everywhere it touched, the flickering stopped. Buildings solidified. The stars embedded in the streets blazed back to life with renewed vigor. The shadow of the keeper emerged from the array, its form now more defined, more substantial. You have restored the connection, it said, and there was something like wonder in its voice. The city is anchored once more. As they watched, the darkness of night began to give way to the first hints of dawn. But unlike before, the dancing stars did not fade with the coming of the sun. Instead, they took up positions in the sky, forming constellations that had not been seen from Earth for thousands of years. The stars have found their places again, the keeper observed. Now I must show you the library, as promised. They descended the tower to find the city transformed. The streets glowed with steady light, and from open doorways and windows came sounds of activity, as if the restoration of the connection had awakened the city itself. ... The keeper led them to a building near the center of Astrapolis, a magnificent structure with columns that resembled waterfalls frozen in mid-flow. Inside was a vast circular chamber whose walls were lined with shelves that extended upward farther than the eye could see. But these shelves held no ordinary books. Instead, they were filled with crystalline spheres of various sizes, each containing what appeared to be a swirling galaxy in miniature. Each sphere contains knowledge, the keeper explained. To access it, one need only hold it and think of what one wishes to learn. Sinbad approached one of the shelves with reverence, his fingers hovering near a sphere that glowed with soft blue light. "May I?" he asked. At the keeper's nod, he carefully lifted the sphere. It was lighter than it appeared, as if it might float away if he loosened his grip. Closing his eyes, Sinbad thought of the dancing stars that had led them here. Immediately, understanding flowed into his mind like water filling an empty vessel. He saw the ancient patterns, the celestial choreography that had been performed since the birth of the universe. He learned how the stars communicated, how they recorded history, how they guided those wise enough to read their movements. When he opened his eyes, he carefully returned the sphere to its place, his expression one of profound awe. "This is indeed a precious treasure," he said softly. "And now you understand why it must be protected," the keeper replied. Together, they formulated a plan. The keeper would remain as guardian of the library, but would no longer block the connection between earth and sky. Sinbad and Yasmina would return to their world as ambassadors of Astrapolis, seeking others with pure intentions who could benefit from the wisdom stored here. The dancing stars would serve as guides for those worthy to find the way, appearing in the sky once each year when the veil between worlds was thinnest. As they prepared to leave, the keeper presented them with a gift, a small crystal sphere containing a perfect replica of the stellar alignment array. "If ever you need to find your way back to Astrapolis, this will guide you," it explained. With grateful hearts, Sinbad and Yasmina bade farewell to the keeper and the wondrous city. The stars escorted them back down the mountain, along the path of fallen stars, through the forest of gemstone leaves, and to the crystal beach where the moonbeam waited patiently. As they sailed away from the Isle of Asteria, they looked back to see the island slowly fade from view, not vanishing in failure, but concealing itself until it was needed again. Above them, the dancing stars gradually returned to their normal positions, but occasionally one would twist in a little pirouette as if winking at the travelers it had guided. "We'll come back," Sinbad promised, carefully securing their crystal sphere in a special compartment aboard the moonbeam. "And next time, we'll bring others who will appreciate the wisdom of the stars." "I think we've only begun to understand what's out there," Yasmina agreed, looking up at the brightening sky where a few stubborn stars still twinkled despite the morning light. As they sailed home with the rising sun warming their backs, both felt changed by their adventure, reminded that the universe was vaster and more wondrous than anyone could imagine, and that knowledge, properly respected, was the greatest treasure of all. And so, my sleepy little stargazers, Sinbad and Yasmina returned from their journey through the dancing stars with new wisdom and a special crystal to help them find their way back someday. Their adventure reminds us that sometimes the most valuable discoveries aren't things we can hold in our hands, but the understanding we carry in our hearts. Now, as your eyelids grow heavy and your thoughts begin to drift, imagine those dancing stars swirling gently above you, guiding you toward peaceful dreams. Perhaps tonight, in your own dreams, you'll visit Astrapolis and walk its star-paved streets. Or maybe you'll sail with Sinbad and Yasmina to find new wonders waiting beyond the horizon. Tomorrow night, I'll tell you about the time they discovered an underwater garden where sea flowers bloom only in moonlight, and singing shells tell stories of ancient ocean voyages. But for now, rest your weary heads and let sleep carry you away on gentle waves of starlight. Sweet dreams, my precious ones. Sweet, sweet dreams.